welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. We are here to discuss the latest episode of The Santa Clauses, which is episode 5 of 6, I believe. Yeah, episode 5 of 6, across the Yuleverse. Now, it's the kind of thing that's like, this is going to be the thing that's going to answer all the questions that you have about Scott becoming Santa. And it's in a retcon. And they do it via format like the, what's it called episode? The flashback episode of WandaVision. Bernard comes back and brings Santa into the Yuleverse, which is what Scott calls it. It's kind of like this weird afterlife for Santas, where all the past Santas kind of exist. If you watch the Centenary special of Doctor Who, it's, where Jodie Whittaker goes after the Master takes over her body. And takes over as the Doctor, and you have all the past Doctors there. Think that. So, what you have is, basically you have this entire episode devoted to explaining to Scott why he was meant to be Santa, and how Santas choose their successor and go like that. And I think part of it is that it's a little unclear, and it doesn't do a ton to because the basic explanation they give is that they, in this world, St. Nicholas existed and did his thing. His parents died, left him a bunch of money, and the money all goes to, and he gives the money all away. This brings magic into the world and creates elves, and I guess gnomes too, because all the elves have problems with gnomes. All of that. So that happens. Then there are iteration upon iteration of Santa, leading up to Santa number 17, and I was like, oh, alright, well, when they did that, I'm like, oh, okay, so it's like Santa regenerates. Okay, I've seen this before. So Santa 17 was the one that died, quote unquote, when he fell off the roof, which is, and again, there's a joke in this that I think would have landed better had they done this as a movie, and not as a series. There's a joke where Jim O'Heir, who plays Santa 17, so it's like, I thought it was really funny until that, I thought it was a great little, because Jim O'Heir plays Jerry on Parks and Rec, who fucks everything up. And when they said that Jim O'Heir was the Santa before Scott, I'm like, that's great that he died by getting scared and falling off the roof. Great fucking idea. And then they're like, no, I didn't fall off the roof. I did that on purpose to transfer it to you. And it's like, alright, whatever. Forget all of that. I thought that joke would go a little bit better. But either way, so Santa is, this thing is passed on. Up until Scott, who was the first human Santa, they were all these ethereal beings that didn't, they're mythical beings. Then they decided to pass it on to Scott, instead of, instead of just letting him, instead of, letting him be the new Santa. They were like, instead of, passing it to another ethereal being, because of technology and stuff like that, they had to pass it on to a human, because they felt the human could carry on the Christmas tradition. And one thing led to another, and now Scott is Santa, and he's been Santa, and to guide him along what he needs to do to keep Santa magic, Bernard's been giving him the clauses to show him that he needs to be Santa. And the joke where he's like, no, I'm Santa, why would I fall off the roof? And Scott's like, yeah, who would fall off the roof? And it takes a minute for you to recognize, but it's like, oh yeah, remember 4 weeks ago there was that one episode where he did fall off the roof before he quit? I think in a movie that moment lands better. So like, half the episode takes place in this place, and I say half the episode because it appears that's as much as the effects budget would allow, because then beyond that, they're back at home, and they're back at the North Pole. Which, again, North Pole still feels very small. Like, I understand it is not a movie. That said, whatever the budget was for the movies in 2007, just match that. Just fucking match that. Because why does this feel so much smaller? And it's not even like it feels smaller in a way where it's like it matches what it's supposed to be. Like it's not like the plot demands that it be smaller, because like the entire time it's been smaller. Whereas like as the Christmas magic goes away, it's like it's getting smaller and smaller. But like this whole idea it's just getting smaller and smaller, and it just feels so like it feels like I'm watching a CW show, which I don't like using that in a derogatory sense, but like or like Battlestar Galactica or Star Trek or any number of other places where it's like you have these big high concept fantasy science fiction shows, yet we always hang out in the same 5 places because those are the sets we have built, and those are the only hallways we have. Like, you know, if you look at The Flash, there is the main control room of Star Labs. There's the same hospital room that every person who died in the Arrowverse, died in, where it's the same one that, what's his name, Quentin died there, and the daughter that died there, and I want to say Sarah died there too. Laurel and Sarah both died in that room. I want to say there were at least 2 characters of The Flash who were hospitalized in that same room, and you're like, alright, well, it's the same room in everything, because they have one hospital room they just rotate through. And then Barry went there to talk to, who was it in the hospital room? Was it Captain Cold when he went into the Speed Force? Kind of. But that's kind of what this episode is. It's kind of like, it's the Barry goes into the Speed Force episode, and I think that the biggest disappointment about this episode, or this show in general, is that this episode highlights what is the strongest aspect of this show, and the series as a whole, really. I think that one of the strongest things is a relationship between Scott and Bernard. And when you get back to that in this episode, for half the episode that he's in, it's great. And it's like, alright, I can put aside some of what I didn't like. Not all of it, obviously, but some of what I didn't like I can put aside. But you do that for 15 minutes, and it's like, that's not enough to really salvage the show. I mean, it's definitely the strongest episode because of that dynamic. The dynamic between the two of them, where it's like, he knows what he's doing. And they very obviously tried to do it with the new girl. But it doesn't click. And that's fundamentally a problem with this. Like, you know, that relationship has to be obstinate, but if you're going to do that, you need to have someone who was there before him, who was there, you know, and I think that's the thing where it's like, alright, so he knows what's going on, but no one else does. Like, it's just kind of silly to me. I don't know, I feel like that they're, like, that's the thing that's, like, that it's a cool idea, but whatever. And again, I feel like we're getting into the third act of the Santa Claus 2 at this point, because it's fundamentally the same movie. You know, Santa leaves the North Pole for reasons, and he has to, and as a result of leaving the North Pole, and whoever he leaves there as a replacement has shit things up. So he has, I mean, really, it's the plot of 2 of the 3 movies, where it's like, he has to be Santa. And I think that the thing is, too, across the Yuleverse, I think attempting to, like, you know, capitalize on Spider-Verse or any number of other things, where it's like there are multiple iterations of the same character, and we all have to understand, you know, that there is a lineage to this character that goes across, you know, time and space. And it's, okay, cool, understand that. But, number one, the problem is, you don't have a cool thing tied to it, or lineage to it. Because again, like the scene with the, you know, where they interview Peyton Manning, if they did like Clerks 3 and had a bunch of small cameos, all doing like 1 or 2 lines, who are doing their shtick as to why they should be Santa, that could work. And I would, like, that would have been funnier. It's like here, it's like, bring in famous other Santas. Like, bring in famous people to play the other Santas. Don't have me sitting here and being like, oh, is that Jerry from Parks and Rec? And then not have anyone else big there. Like, I'm concerned about what the budget for this show is. I think that's fundamentally what my issue is. Like, it feels like they didn't give this show the budget it needed, so they needed to make cuts to constrain within that budget. And at the same time, you're like, well, you definitely should just rework the show from the ground up if that's the case. Like, I would be curious to know what the budget for this show was, and then compare and contrast that to the budget of the original show, and account for inflation, all of the original movies, and account for inflation and all of that. But I would be interested to see that number and see what the difference is between them, because I think there's a stark difference in that, and I think that would accommodate for what's it called, for the for the whole, the difference between them. And at the end of the day, I think that's the biggest issue I have with this, is that it's like, it doesn't, like, the other movies feel bigger. This series feels very small, and everything about it doesn't feel like it's being quite executed right. And it's like, well, why isn't it being executed right? And it's like, just because. It's like, imagine that, like, the scene where he's interviewing people in the third episode, like, the scene where he's interviewing people and he's trying to pick out everything, like, imagine that scene, but it's like, you bring in, like, like, I don't know, like, I would say, if it was me, I would say, let's see if we can get Chris Evans in, because you can get a Captain America joke out of that. I'd say, Mark Hamill, because he's got the beard. And, like, that's what I would do, especially if you're doing Disney. You go, all right, let's synergize. Let's look at other things that we have on Disney, or on, or on this, and just bring them in. Or bring in other famous holidays, like Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Bring in, all these other famous people, and be like, all right, well, here we go. You can like, famous people from Christmas movies, and just have them go like that. And I feel like that would be a great way to have done that. I also feel like the issue with the Mrs. Claus of it all, I'm starting to have more of a problem with, because at the end of the day, the arc for Carol has been gaining her own autonomy and becoming her own person again. Because she was her own person. She was a assistant principal at a high school. She was her own person. And then she comes back to, and then she comes back to, like, she goes back to the North Pole, and then she is entirely defined by her relationship to Scott. And it's like, alright, she's been doing that for 20 years now, or, 15 years now. Like, that's gotta get tiresome at a certain point. And it's like, look, she wants to be her own person, and now she's found her calling back to doing what she was doing. And at the same time, I'm kind of like, well, this is silly. And they never really define, I don't think, why they needed a human to carry it. Like, why was it incompatible with technology? Why do they need a human to do it? And I think it's like, it's so dumb, because wasn't the entire point of the third one, like, capitalism fucks everything up, like, or extreme consumerism fucks everything up? Because doesn't Martin Short show up, and and I haven't seen this movie. I think I've seen this movie once, maybe twice, ever. I saw it in the movies in 2006 when I was in 6th grade, and then I don't think I've seen it. Maybe I've seen bits and pieces of it since, but wasn't the entire point of that movie that, like, he was, wow, it has been 15 years. The entire point of that movie was that he does a, he goes back in time to where he, to where I guess now Jim O'Heir but then it's so dumb because it's like the magic is in the suit, or is it just that they picked Scott from an early age and he's going to be Santa? Like, there are so many weird things that go into this now. And I think the thing is, too, is like I was saying about Spider-Verse and all of that, where it's playing on that, and it's like we're capitalizing on Spider-Verse and you knowing that word for Yuleverse. And the idea that that's going to be, okay, so the point of that is anyone can be Spider-Man. Anyone can put on the suit is the moral of Into the Spider-Verse. Anyone can be Spider-Man. It's like, that's the point of that. It seems like this is the exact opposite, where it's like, it has to be this guy, and Santa has to look like this, and Santa has to be this. And it feels really weird that that's the stance that they're taking, and that's the hill they're willing to die on. Especially considering what they're trying to articulate within the show. It just doesn't feel quite right. I just don't know. Nothing about this really feels, good. I don't think. I think there's a lot of issues with this. And then, like, and I completely understand. I think if Elon Musk did take over the North Pole and elves started dying, he would just be like, yeah, fuck them, who cares? I think it's a completely, rational thing that, or a realistic thing for them to articulate for, what's his name, for Simon. I just feel like the idea of, the thing is, you can't portray him the same way as the AI bad guy, the Terminator 2 bad guy, where it's like, the bad guy is Santa Claus too. I'm saying the Terminator 2, but it's the AI version of Santa. But you can't portray him the same way because it doesn't quite flow properly. Because it's like that one is acting on orders and cannot recognize the nuance. It's like there's nothing about Simon that shouldn't recognize nuance or importance of things or anything like that. Like, the minute he goes like, okay, so the Christmas magic is gone, is dying as a result of this, and his thing isn't working, it's like, alright, we'll create tech to fix it. It's like, yeah, but like, we don't have time for that. And then the whole thing with the kids, I'm like, alright, whatever. I don't know who this show is for exactly, because I don't think that this is something that I would have watched at the age that I watched the Santa Claus and been like, this is fantastic, in the same way that I watched the Santa Claus and I'm like, this movie is fucking amazing. Because I loved that movie as a kid, I liked 2 a lot too when that came out, but I don't think that, like, I don't think this movie would have done that same thing. I don't think this show's done the same thing. I don't think it's recaptured what that original movie was. And I think that's a big problem with this, where it's like, if you're going to do the nostalgia sequel, or the nostalgia sequel series, I think that you have to make an attempt. I don't think it's even an attempt to recapture the original, because it's like, it is this weird thing where it's like, oh, there was no Mrs. Claus. We made all that up just to get, like, okay, but why? If that was the case, then why was that necessary? So now we've enslaved a woman just for the sake of enslaving a woman. Like, why? What's the reason for that? If there was no Mrs. Claus, then like, why did we need one? I mean, besides the fact that, our knowledge of reality says that there should be one, why do they need one? And I don't think the show does a good enough job of, like, the explanation that they give is not good enough, I don't think. But yeah, we'll wrap up there for today. We'll have more coming later this week, and we'll be back with all of that as it happens. So, until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.